Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I am going to be going over my reading stats as well as my reading goals for 2022 so far. Since we are now through the first quarter of the year, I thought it would be a good time to look at how my reading's going so far as well as looking at my reading goals, because I do make quarterly goals, and to reflect on those and then kind of set my goals or intentions for the next couple of months. So first up, I'm going to be going through my reading stats, and I will be using the stats that are provided for me on Storygraph. I do track my reading on Storygraph, but I don't make my account public because I like just sort of having it as my own personal log and just being able to see my own stats and things like that. But I did want to say, like, all the information that I'm taking for this video is all coming from Storygraph. So far this year, I have read 18 books, and that has totaled 6,325 pages, which is great in my opinion. The top moods of the books that I've read are reflective, emotional, and mysterious, which sounds about right. And the vast majority of the books that I've read have been between 300 and 500 pages, which is my sweet spot. Like, I love books that are usually around like 350-ish pages. And so it, makes sense that those are where the majority of the books lie in terms of what I've read so far this year. And in terms of pacing, most of the books that I read are medium paced, which again sounds about right. In terms of my fiction and nonfiction breakdown, around 28% of my reading so far this year has been nonfiction, which in my opinion is good, not great. I feel like when I am not paying attention to this, I fall within like 20 to 25%. And then when I am paying attention to it, I will get above that 25% mark. So anything above 25%, in my opinion, is good for me. But I do always like to try to push myself to pick up more nonfiction. But yeah, so far I feel like I've been doing a okay job at picking up nonfiction along with my usual fiction picks. In terms of my genre breakdown, this is always really interesting to me because the way Storygraph tracks things is like things can have multiple genres. So it's always interesting to see sort of how things break down. I will say, like, there are two on here that I always have an issue with, and that's specifically race and LGBTQIA+, because while those are topics of books, I would never consider those genres, but those are listed on here because that's how things are classified on Storygraph. So historical is the highest genre on my list, followed by fantasy, which I thought was really interesting because I don't consider myself a fantasy reader. But because I read so broadly, it just happens to be that I've picked up a decent amount of fantasy books this year, I guess. And by a decent amount, I mean 3. So like 3 out of 18 is really not a lot. But again, I just tend to read so broadly that the fact that I've picked up 3 already is apparently notable. So yeah, overall, I feel like I'm having a really good reading year. And I feel like this segues nicely into sort of like my reading goals. And so my reading goals for the year were 2, or at least my reading goals for the quarter. I had 2 of them. One of them was to read down my physical TBR, and my stretch goal was kind of to hit like a 0 TBR in the first quarter. My second goal was to read comics, and specifically to read along with Ashley from Bookish Realm and her comic reading club. So I have not reached a 0 TBR, and I don't really think I'll hit a 0 TBR this year, but I am doing a really good job with it. Like, at the end of 2021, I had around 30 unread books on my physical TBR, and right now my number is currently sitting at 20, which personally I think is really great. However, I was looking at my physical TBR and I realized that, like, the reason why I'm at 20 is because I've received some books so far this year. So I use this app called Libib. It's a website as well as an app you can download to your phone. This is not sponsored. This is just an app I found online that lets you like catalog books. Like, it's used to be like a library tracker. So you like actual organizations and things like that use this to track their libraries. And so I use it to catalog the books in my library. And one of the things you can do on there is sort books based on the date that you add them. So when I get an unread book, I scan it on my phone and it gets added to the list of TBR, and I can now see like what date I added all those books. And so in terms of books that I acquired in 2021, that total is currently 13. So the oldest book that I currently have on my physical TBR is from September of 2021, which in my opinion is pretty amazing. And so I think, like, rather than shooting for a 0 TBR, which, like, I never knew if I was ever actually going to get to a Z or a TBR because, again, I do get books from publishers on occasion, and I enjoy like reading from the library and things like that. I think really what I want my goal to be is to just have books on my physical TBR for less than a year. So out of all of the books on my physical TBR, 7 are from September of 2021, 5 are from November, and 1 is from December. And so I feel like if I work through my physical TBR in that way, where mostly focusing on the older book, but I do let myself like read some of the newer books I might acquire, then I think that's fine. And as long as like nothing is sitting on there for longer than a year, I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job. And I think that that's probably a better marker of my physical TBR more than just the pure number itself, because I do think that every now and then it's nice to buy a book. And I think that as long as like my physical unread books are kind of keeping relative pace to the way that I'm reading, then that's also a good thing. Because again, if I was someone who read like 20 books a month, having a 20 book TBR, unread TBR, is not that big of a deal. But because I'm not that person, I want to keep my physical TBR relatively small. So I think the less than 1 year rule is going to be kind of what I'm using moving forward. And then in terms of the comics thing, like I've been doing terrible. I have not spent any time reading the books from Ashley's book club because every time she has a live show, it's on a day that I can't do it. And obviously, like, I don't expect her to accommodate anything for me, but it's something that I did not realize or did not think about ahead of time. And so because I never make her live shows, I end up never reading the books on time, and then I just never end up reading the comics in general. Now, I have read some comics this year, so that's the good thing. So I have read 1 graphic memoir so far this year, which was Good Talk, which was amazing. And I have others on my physical TBR. And so I do know that, like, I will be reading more over the course of the year, but I think instead of trying to force myself to read certain comics or certain graphic novels or anything along those lines, or like follow along with the book club, which is not actually keeping me accountable, I'm going to try to just shoot for 1 a month. We'll see if this works. Like, I am trying so hard to remember to pick up comics and graphic novels, but I always just, whatever I have to read, I always end up just going for novels. But the thing is like, I enjoy comics too. And so I still haven't gotten into the habit of working those into my regular routine. So now my goal is 1 a month for this next quarter. And maybe by the end of the year, I can hit between 10 and 12. And I think if I can hit that number by the end of the year, it will definitely be a success. And then I thought I would quickly do an update on my no-buy year so far. I thought that since I'm doing like all of these quarterly updates, a quarterly update on my no-buy would be great. It hasn't been perfect, which I didn't expect it to be perfect, but I do think I'm doing an okay job. So far this year, I've purchased 3 things that I technically shouldn't have purchased, one of which I think is reasonable. The other 2 were not needed, but I was willing to justify all 3 of them. So the first thing is I purchased a new bookshelf for myself. I have a bookshelf reorganization video that I am working on, and I plan on getting out. I wanted to get it out in March. It didn't work out because I got sick. So I'm hoping to get that out in April. But yeah, I reorganized my bookshelves, and while I was doing that, I realized that I was like in desperate need of more shelves, and I was like, my options are to either get rid of some books, which wasn't going to happen, or to just bite the bullet and buy another bookshelf. And so I did. So I bought a 3-shelf bookshelf, and I could afford it, obviously. And so that cost me around $40. But honestly, like, I'm really, really happy with that purchase because I felt like I was getting really, really overwhelmed with like the stacks of books that were piling up around my room. And now that I have another bookshelf, it makes a huge difference. The other thing I purchased was like a beanie or a winter hat. I went to a concert in March, and I saw this duo called the Oshima Brothers, who are fantastic. I'll have a link to them down in the description because I think that they are honestly really, really great. But they're just like these 2 brothers who were performing at a show. There was like maybe 20 people at the show, and they were just like talking to the crowd. And they were like, yeah, like, we have all these beanies and we're headed home soon. And so if we could sell some of these, that'd be great. And I was talking to a friend who I was there with, and she was talking about how she used to sell merch for Fall Out Boy, and how in those early days, like, merch is basically the main way that these bands make money. I was like, you know what? A winter hat is not going to kill me, and I can support this band. It's a really simple hat, but, you know, a nice warm hat in Chicago, you can't really go wrong. So I bought the beanie. It's fine. And then I did purchase 1 book over the past 3 months. I ended up buying a copy of 5 Wounds, which was one of my favorite books that I read last year. And I justified it. I was at this independent bookstore killing time before the concert. And it was my first time visiting Madison Street Books here in Chicago. They recently opened. And I was like, I hate going to bookstores and not supporting independent bookstores and things like that. And I was like, I'm going to just buy one book, and I'm going to buy a book that I've already read. So I bought Five Wounds, which is now out in paperback. And so, yeah, I think that, like, with my no-buy moving forward, like, I think that I'm doing a good job, but I do think it won't be a pure no-buy, because I do think that there are certain times where I have the means to be able to spend money on, like, things that are not necessary, but I want to, like, support these independent artists or bookstores or things like that. And so I'm gonna, like, allow myself to make exceptions to my own rule of not buying new things unless they're, like, replacements or anything like that. So yeah, I feel like 3 things over the course of the year is really good, especially considering, like, I desperately want some new clothes, but I have not been buying anything. And I desperately want to buy some new makeup, but I haven't been buying anything that hasn't been a replacement, especially with the Sephora sale currently going on. But yeah, overall, I'm, like, pretty proud of myself with how much I've been able to keep control of my money. And yeah, I never expected myself to be perfect at any of these things, but I feel like for me, goals are sort of like things that I'm reaching for, and I don't ever expect them to be 100% successes. They're just like ways of pushing me in the right direction almost. So yeah, those are my quick updates on my reading so far this year, as well as my reading goals and reading stats. Basically going to continue on with the no buy, with, like, you know, the occasional exception possibly. I'm going to attempt to work on my physical TBR from oldest. So that way by September, I've read all the books that I bought in September. And then I'm going to try to continue to incorporate comics into my reading, even though I'm not great at it. But, like, let's try for one a month. I think I can do one a month. So yeah, let me know down in the comments below if you have any questions about anything that I talked about here today. Or feel free to let me know down below how y'all are doing on your reading so far this year. If you are still sticking to your goals or not. As a reminder, you don't need to completely give up on your goals if you don't want to. Like, if the first couple of months haven't been going great, start again. It's okay. No one really cares except you. So if you have a goal that you're trying to accomplish, even if you don't do it at 100% accuracy, even if you start over now and you make some progress towards it, I think you'll still be happy with yourself at the end of the year. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.